we're talking about a very important topic about the trends in early education around compliance. What's the same? What has changed? And I'm delighted to have back with me subject matter expert Tracy Nardo. Hi, Tracy.
Hi, Lynn. I'm so excited to be back.
Very happy to have you here. And in our last episode, for those that may not yet have caught it, they can go to the website underneath the blog. But we talked about high risk moments in an early care environment and things to look for. So we're continuing the conversation today around, like I said, compliance, and we're going to do some deeper dives on what's changed over the past 5 years. And then we're going to bring up the subject of OSHA and where that fits in to our daily operations. But for those that don't already know you, please introduce yourself and a bit about your background.
Yes, thank you. My name is Tracy Nardo. I am currently a licensing specialist at Celebree Schools. I have been in early childhood for 36 years, and the past 14 have been in risk management on the safety side of things. So my passion is safety and licensing and just making sure those kids are safe and in a great environment.
Absolutely. And what I appreciate about your journey is you've seen so many aspects of it, both in the classroom as a leader, working for a corporate brand. So you've seen it, and then you work so closely with our licensing specialists. And I always like to encourage schools to consider their licensing representative as an ally. Do you want to comment about that?
Yeah, so I think it's really good. I just had a licensing meeting yesterday, and they were so excited that we met with them, and we are looking to partner with them on many aspects. So they were just over the moon. I mean, kudos to North Carolina because they were fantastic to work with yesterday. So we really just had a meet and greet yesterday. We are building in the North Carolina area, and really it's about that partnership. So a lot of times schools think licensing is a little scary. They're scared when they walk through the door. They see them coming in the parking lot, but really it is a partnership, and you really should use them as a resource.
Wonderful. Well, we could also do a deeper dive on that. But for today's topic, let's talk about how the spotlight on compliance and safety really has changed over the years. We'll just kind of like use that 5-year window. Why don't you go first? What have you been seeing as some of the top either changes or focal points?
Yeah, I mean, I think I might go back a little bit before 5 years, but compliance back in like 2017, maybe, some states had legislation passed regarding ACE standards. So back then they were upping the game on inspections and background checks and safe sleep. So I've seen a lot in the past. I mean, that's more than 5 years, but I've seen a lot changed in the past, even 5 years. So I'm glad you brought up OSHA because I'm so excited to talk about that. I just think, when it comes to OSHA, sometimes our insurance companies, when it's time for renewals, they may want to review licensing history over the last year. And in some cases, they will deny coverage if there's OSHA violations and there's violations from licensing. So it has really changed in terms of just getting the information out to schools about OSHA, because I think a lot of schools aren't sure whether we fall under that general industry category for OSHA, and some schools don't really practice OSHA. So, yeah, I'm super excited to talk about that today.
Well, I'm actually on the fly here. We're going to kind of flip our agenda and start with OSHA. Why not? Right?
Yes. Yeah, that sounds great.
So let's really unpack that. Let's start with just the foundation, because in some of my dealings, early education owners and administrators don't always see that OSHA is a priority. So let's just start with the basic question is, does OSHA apply or not apply to my school?
Absolutely. So childcare falls under that general general industry category, which should observe OSHA. So that does fall under childcare with regards to health and safety for all children, families, and staff. So when it comes to OSHA, one of the main things I would say is hazard communication. Are you familiar with that, Lynn?
I'm not, so please, let's,
Okay.
what is it?
Yes. So hazard communication. So there's a lot about OSHA, but when it comes to childcare in itself, there's a few topics I'd like to discuss today. So one is hazard communication, which requires employers to disclose toxic and hazardous materials. So that is labeling your spray bottles. If they're using bleach and water, so that is one way childcare is doing that. And it's by identifying chemicals and having information on the label. So they need to have a hazardous symbol on that label. They need to state exactly what's in that spray bottle. Oftentimes I go in schools and it's a bottle with, blue water. I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's soap and water. I don't know if that's Windex. So we really need to make sure that all spray bottles are labeled appropriately. And then along with that, there's a safety data sheet that must accompany all chemicals.
So a safety is that what's in the bottle, what the mix is?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
So safety data sheets, which is also known as an SDS sheet, it's a document that lists the chemicals relating to health and safety of that particular product. So it's a type of like fact sheet. It's information on the hazards of working with chemicals and procedures that must be followed to ensure safety. So one safety data sheet has 16 sections to it. So there's a lot of information on it. Absolutely. There's a lot of like technical and scientific information, physical and chemical properties, which is kind of out of my wheelhouse. But really for the childcare industry, the first aid to be given is an important section. Like if something should spill on you, how to take care of that emergency. If it should spill on the floor, how are we cleaning that up? Are we using personal protective equipment such as goggles or gloves? So there's a lot of information on one safety data sheet, but there's like 4 particular sections that are really important to know. Like the first aid to be given, how to handle and store a chemical properly, what to do in case of an emergency, and how to clean up something if something should spill. So what I always tell the schools is to go around the school, look in the kitchen, look in maintenance closets, look in teacher cabinets, and write down and make a list of all the chemicals in the school. And then go back to the computer and you can go on their specific website, such as like Clorox. You could go on Clorox website and put in Clorox safety data sheet. One should pop right up, and then you can print that out. So you need one for every chemical that you have in the school. So that's a little bit of a task. Some schools have a lot of chemicals, and then really it's a time to kind of go through the closets and make sure that there isn't stuff in there that you really don't need anymore. So yeah, there's a lot, right? So I would recommend that you go on Google, go on the manufacturer's website, print out one for every chemical, and create a binder. And then what you want to do is train your staff on those safety data sheets. The training is extremely important. So you want to train them on like what to do in case of an emergency. Where is the safety data sheet located? I will tell you that I have visited schools with the insurance carriers, and they go into schools and they will ask random teachers where they keep their safety data sheets. And sometimes they're scared to death and they have no idea what they're talking about. And other times they can point it out and tell you exactly where it is and what that entails. So it's really important for staff to know where that binder is located and what is in that and the reason why we're doing it.
So let's pump the brakes right there. You have given a lot of information, which is great, but you also dropped in there when the insurance company is doing an inspection. So let's slow that down and tie it back to OSHA and what that relationship might look like.
Sure. So the insurance company that insures the schools will come out and do a workplace safety inspection. And they are looking at things such as slips, trips, and falls. They're looking at fire extinguishers, egress, outside on the playground, fencing, all kinds of things. But the other part is they're looking at OSHA. They're looking to see if all staff have been trained on, OSHA personal protective equipment. And then the safety data sheets, they want to know where they're located. So they do have a checklist of some sort that they do go through, and they help you. I mean, I worked with them before in schools and they are fabulous. They really explain why to the directors and the staff, and they help them get through the process.
Okay. Are there other areas when it comes to OSHA in the childcare setting that we want to highlight? We talked about the hazardous chemicals. So let's unpack if there's other areas.
Yeah, I think just one more. The personal protective equipment, also known as PPE, you'll hear that referenced a lot. It is the equipment worn to minimize exposures to hazards and serious injuries that could, that could result in not wearing PPE. So it's important to talk to them about goggles and gloves and why we're wearing it. Why are we wearing goggles when we're mixing chemicals? We don't want any like bleach water to splash up on an eye. It's important to wear the gloves if you come in contact with any blood. So it's training on personal protective equipment and how it's properly fitted, where it's stored, how it's cleaned, and how it's just maintenance. And does it fit properly? Is that eyewear too big? Does it have sides? Making sure the gloves are appropriate. So really focusing on personal protective equipment. So it ties into the hazard communication, the safety data sheets, really just focusing around chemical safety.
So I think we all imagine that this is being done on a regular basis. And there are those scenarios that, we hope it doesn't happen to us, or, thankfully there wasn't a terrible outcome, but there are those situations out there. Are there any that come to mind to really illustrate the importance of this that you can share with our listeners?
Sure. So, OSHA doesn't come out like a licensing consultant would. They would come out and do an inspection, or they would look around if someone has made a complaint. So yes, I have witnessed complaints in childcare centers, around cleaning materials, around not cleaning properly or not having spray bottles labeled. That has resulted in the past in fines. So it could be thousands of dollars for something as simple as, maybe not having a spray bottle labeled, maybe not having a cleaning checklist, maybe not cleaning properly, using the proper steps. So really, really focusing on licensing as it does overlap with OSHA.
Right. And thousands of dollars of fines is not budgeted money.
No,
So,
absolutely. Yeah.
we're not talking a couple $100 fine. We're, thousands could be 6,000
Yeah.
for something that's unlabeled as a, for example.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Not to mention, something that maybe appear to be consumable that's not properly labeled could have catastrophic consequences. Have you ever seen that?
I have.
Really?
There was a person that was mixing bleach and water in a gallon jug and did not label it. And it was in the kitchen on the counter, and someone thought it was water. So they poured that into a cup and they drank it. And yeah, they ended up in the hospital. And, there's again, a whole bunch of things that happen in a result of something like that. So absolutely. Yeah, the
Okay.
importance of labeling.
Yeah, it seems like such a basic thing, but there's lots of areas where labeling needs to happen. But I think because at the Compliance Alliance, we're really focused on best practices to ensure operational compliance is being followed, which falls under the heading of safety. And in previous conversations that I've had in the industry, I really think that the practices that are followed, like for manufacturing or for hospitals, even for banking institutions, financial institutions, there are guidelines for when it comes to safety, OSHA being one of them, that should be worn as a badge of honor. It's almost like we are a OSHA compliant school. We follow the practices. So I don't think it's something we want to shy away from, and it's helpful to bring it into the spotlight.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I was with a company that really focused on OSHA, and they would have schools keep track of how many days they were safe. So if someone, yeah, so if someone went, 320 days, there were different rewards given. So, and it was just a shout out, like, we have maintained a really great school, we have done our training, we are a safe school. So it was something to be very proud of, and they would post that.
That's outstanding. And it's
Yeah,
also a marketing tool. Let's be
yeah,
honest. It's
yeah,
something to highlight with when you're recruiting staff or families to talk
yeah,
about what you do. Because although parents are becoming more savvy about licensing and where to find information about your licensing visits, they don't often think of OSHA as part of the childcare setting and
no,
education. So, but they know what OSHA is. I would imagine the average person knows what OSHA is. So that kind of elevates that perception of a safe environment.
yes, yeah. So that company would post it on their parent board. So they would do tours, and they would really talk about their safety, compliance. So it was great. It was great.
I
Yep.
love that. I bet that's a takeaway for somebody listening, that they number of days safe, because again, in construction, they do that. They celebrate that, and there's bonuses and
Yeah.
rewards and certainly well-earned bragging rights, as I
Yeah.
call it, to say that this is what we've done. There's a sense of pride in the type of school that you represent. So I love that. That's outstanding.
I was just talking about OSHA and, all the components and unfortunately the fines. But I think I mentioned earlier on that when it's time for renewals for insurance, um, the insurance may review a licensing history or OSHA history. And if there is a lot of violations or fines, they may decline coverage. So that's huge. And you
Well,
don't
that is say again, I'm sorry, I talked over you. Say that again, Tracy.
and you definitely don't want to go down that route.
No, no, not at all. And Samantha Phillips is somebody with Comploy, and she is a big advocate. In fact, I was just talking with her before our conversation. But that you're right. Anything when it comes to insurance that would give them a reason to decline. And there are situations, we're gathering data on this right now, where licensing violations, and I imagine OSHA too, those violations, when does it lead to a declination? And it could be minor citations, but nonetheless, they still do contribute to a reason for insurers to drop coverage. And that's a very hard place to be, because there are so few choices to choose from right now for those that are still serving the industry, providing coverage in the industry.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So thank you for calling that out. Well, as we kind of zoom up, this is a great quick 101 on OSHA and some takeaways. I think too that making sure not only things are labeled, but handling of the hazardous materials, the protective equipment, and then the safety data sheet. Those are kind of like a mini checklist of things that we should be looking for. In your role, do they have such a thing, a checklist of sorts that you recommend?
As far as OSHA,
OSHA, or just kind of like staying on top of those things? I know there's lots of different checklists, but related to this topic, or would it just be more routine checklists about, handling of
yes, I think it would
chemicals?
be more routine. I mean, I have created something in the past where I'm checking on spray bottles, I'm checking their training, I'm checking to make sure that they understand it for compliance. I'm checking their safety data sheet. So it would be company wide. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, awesome. All right, well, as we zoom up, we started the conversation a bit about the trends and things that we're seeing. Are there other trends with compliance in the spotlight that you've seen, however far back we want to go, but that really are front and center for us to be considering in our schools?
I would say background checks is something that someone might not think is a big, a non-compliant or, but I really do see that this is, we are putting children, I'm sorry, putting staff in the classrooms before we've gotten their background check. Or if they're from out of state, they have to have an out of state background run. So there's a lot of components to that. And some states take a lot longer. Some states are very quick with their results. So just want to make sure for licensing that you do have a background check before they get into the classroom. Just want to make sure that, they are all good to work with children.
Right. Well, and it gets back to the ratios. In order to have the classroom open, that's what we're all struggling with is qualified staff to meet
Yeah.
the ratios, and at a ratio immediately puts you at risk of a licensing violation, as we know.
Yeah, yeah. And I know staffing is very hard these days. It's been hard since, especially hard since COVID,
Yes.
so.
So something else that I'm seeing is, I know this is kind of a big jump from OSHA to social media, but I want to bring it to light because whether it's a OSHA violation or a licensing violation or one of those high risk moments where something has gone wrong, I see one of the biggest changes over the past 5 years is social media. Now we've had social media before the past 5 years, but the role of social media of how quickly we can disseminate information for the betterment or for the worse. Thoughts about that, experiences, things that you've seen that you can share?
Yes. So again, both good and bad. I have seen, Google reviews, reviews on social media that have been really great about a company, about a teacher, about a brand. Then I have seen where, a child was left unattended. Someone else has found this child. They've called licensing, they've called the media shows up, they're on the news. I mean, it snowballs from there. But unfortunately, social media has, everybody's really quick to go on and give a review. And 9 times out of 10, they're reviewing something that's not so great versus what's really great. So I have seen both sides, but unfortunately, social media has come into play in the past 5 years, more so.
I would agree with that. And like you said, for the betterment too, because there's, I mean, I'm in LinkedIn, I'm in Facebook, and some of the groups that have been put together, and there's great news that's happening as well. So it's that both sides of the coin that has its benefits and its drawbacks.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
Another area, if you would like to comment on that, I'm seeing is around workplace safety, and it really has to do with managing difficult behaviors of, well, children, but staff, and because they're under a lot of pressure, the mental health pressures, and also families. Can you comment on any of that in your experience?
Sure. So I have a little bit of background with that. I would say you're right. Since COVID, the teachers are working a lot more. They're filling in because staffing is low. They're overworked. They are mentally drained. I do think, there has been companies that have put out their training for their staff on mental wellness. They have given resources as far as children, same type of thing. They realize the behavior has changed a little bit in the classroom. They may have been home for a couple of years and now they're coming back into a group setting. So it's a little bit of a challenging behavior. A lot of times, if it's just one teacher in a classroom, they're struggling to figure out how to manage one child that is, needs support. So companies now are reaching out for other resources, outside help. Parents are now given resources to have, help come into the schools. So I have seen some great things happening. It is still happening though. I think teachers are drained, and we can always use more resources and tools. But there are resources out there for
Yeah.
parents, staff, yeah, and companies.
Very much so. I mean, I'm very encouraged by that, the resources that are out there at the Compliance Alliance. On our website, we have a compliance corner, and there's also the business allies. where we try to showcase and make those resources known and available. One of the ones that we work with is Secure Education Consultants, and they really look at workplace safety. And it's in a different vein than what we were talking about with OSHA, but more about when it comes to volatile behaviors and how to disarm them before it escalates into a situation, a big situation. So isn't it great that those resources are out there? It's really what I want to highlight on this particular piece of it.
Absolutely. I can say I've seen more on this topic in the past, I don't know, 2, 3 years. Um, where I am currently, they have a monthly call and it is on, behavior and wellness, and it's great. It's great.
Yeah, we need that support. The teachers need that support
Yeah.
inside and outside of early education.
Yeah, and I think sometimes they feel like they're just alone on a little island in the classroom all by themselves. So when they get on a call like this, they feel like they're seen and they're heard, and they some takeaways. So it's great.
Absolutely. Well, Tracy, once again, we covered a lot of ground in a short period of time, but I think that my biggest takeaway is prior to us starting our conversation, not just today, but in getting to know you, that we don't hear about OSHA and we shouldn't shy away from it, that it's actually part of your way you can celebrate what your school does. That's a benefit to your family and to the staff that you're attracting and retaining. And those best practices that help ensure the safety of all that are involved. So that's how we started, and that's how we'll end today. So thank you again for your time and your insights.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. I always love talking compliance and safety and licensing.
We'll be back for more, I'm sure. All right, Tracy, thanks so much.
Thank you.